The West is collapsing, and I think it's okay to finally just admit it. I don't think there's much that really can be done at all at this point, because I think what really kept a lot of these countries in the West going was the financial stability, the harmony in the country. And now, when younger people just don't have a future, it's hard to not say that it's a collapse. Now you can say, oh, well, GDP numbers are going up and look, we're innovating. There's all these new technologies. AI, if you thought about AI, it's going to replace all the jobs. The productivity is going to go through the roof. But at what cost? The cost of the people? Isn't that really the whole point? The prosperity of the people living in the country, of the people in these countries flourishing? If that's not the case, then to me, that's a collapse. And I don't really think there's any other way to paint that. That is a collapse. If the people aren't living good lives, if they're not enjoying their lives, if they're not prospering, then it's a collapse. It's an utter failure. And that's really what we're living through right now. And it's not just like one generation or anything like that. Anyone who's alive right now is experiencing it. The younger generations, of course, are going to inherit this, which is even worse if they're still in this country, if they're still in the West, in any Western country. Maybe they've saw the warning signs and now they're planning their exit. It's a huge learning experience too. I didn't really travel a lot. I was always afraid of flying. I never even got on a flight till I was 24 years old. I just never had the experience as a kid because my parents didn't have enough money to really go on any trips that would, need a plane for, right? We would just we do big driving trips in Ontario to Cottage Country, Muskoka, Cohill, like just different areas in Ontario. We never really did much. Like we did drive across Canada when I was a kid. We went to Victoria, and then another year we went all the way out to Newfoundland. But that was really my experience. So I didn't get a chance to travel and explore the world and see what else, the world has to offer. Until I got in my late 20s, I finally mustered up enough courage to just do a trek with my friend in my late 20s. And we did like a big England trip where we kind of drove around England and saw a bunch of small towns and cities. And I really enjoyed that. And I kind of opened my eyes a bit. But they're also going through their own problems in England, although they don't have winters quite as bad as we do here in Canada, at least, and in the northern states. But then when I was able to travel to other places that didn't have winter, that's when things really started to change. My wife, she is Brazilian, and we met right before the pandemic. And during the pandemic, we were fortunate enough to at least do one trip to Brazil. Oh my God. That was a huge, just mind melter. Like, I couldn't believe, the perspective people have. Like, everyone always talks about, oh, Brazil, it's so dangerous. And, my wife will say, yeah, Brazil is dangerous. And there's a lot of countries in South America and Latin America that are dangerous. But my God, the culture shock that I experienced there. Now, of course, like, it's not as safe right now as the West, even though I think Canada is definitely getting, more unsafe. But the weather was incredible. There wasn't any real signs of societal decay that I could see, if I compared it to Canada. There's so many people just crouched over on drugs in Canada that are just overdosing, and there didn't seem to be anything like that. If you saw a bum, they would be just like drunk of the beer on the side taking a nap because of the hot weather. That was like the extent of like the homelessness you'd see. It's like, oh my God, poor homeless person. My goodness. It wasn't like, oh my God, like we need to like stay away. This person might have a knife. He's got a needle on him or something. He's going crazy. He's yelling random stuff in the streets. Nothing like that. It was just kind of like they were exhausted laying on the ground, which is still a problem. I'm not saying homelessness is good in any way, but I'm saying if you compare that to homelessness in the West, there's more of a mental health issue on top of that I feel like it needs to be addressed, not just the fact that someone's homeless and they have an alcohol problem. That was one thing that really shocked me. Also, the food in Brazil. Not only the price, but the quality of food was unbelievable compared to the crap we're getting in Canada. We're fed so much processed garbage here. And on top of that, at the cost we're paying for it, and a lot of that cost is because of taxes, but also just the inflation in general. And a lot of these prices get passed on to the consumer. And now I know you're going to say, well, it's because your currency, but that's why I talked about this in the beginning of the video. This is the point that I wanted to really get across, is because of the strength in currency in the West. That's what really gives the advantage of being in the West or being born in the West. But if you look at a lot of people who come to other countries and they're making, let's say, a minimum wage job, because of the strength in currency in places like Canada, the United States, and other places, they'll just send money back home, right? Because that money gets converted into their currency and it's worth a lot more. They can buy a lot more with it. That's really one of the best strengths that you have being born in the West and living in the West. But if you're born in the West, you don't get to experience that, right? And unless you travel a lot in countries like in Asia or in South America and Latin America, you don't really get to experience the benefits of being born in the West. And that's why I think travel is such an important thing to do, especially in your 20s, before you settle down, get married and stuff, just to see the world and see what other countries have to offer. Even learning another language. Like if you're not learning another language right now, oh my God. I know a little bit of Portuguese, not like enough to have like a 10-minute conversation, but enough to maybe, order some food or something like that and, ask how someone's day is. And I understand a decent amount. I can read a decent amount of Portuguese, but that's the extent of it. I might get better in the years coming, but I think it's really important to try to learn like another language at this point, because you never know what could happen. Things could shift like that. And it's pretty obvious things are shifting. If you are, if you have any sort of pulse on everything going on in the world right now, you'll know that there's a lot of decay in the countries that used to offer the best life. And I guess that's why they call other countries the developing world, because eventually the developing world will be developed. And once it is developed, it might be a more pleasing option for people, right? And some of these countries are older too, right? Like Brazil is a lot older than Canada. I think Brazil is even older than the United States. But it's not even just Brazil. Like look around Asia. Have you seen some of the cities? Like have you seen like Singapore and Shenzhen in China? I know China has its own problems when it comes to authoritarian states and surveillance, and there's a lot of bad things as well. But I'm talking about just sheerly from a technological standpoint. You look at, what they've built in some of these cities and Singapore and stuff, and then you compare it to the decay in big cities in Canada and the United States. It's kind of crazy. It really does feel like the West is collapsing, and I don't know when this is going to fully come to fruition, but I think that it's a good idea to plan and prepare, and at least don't be shocked when it fully happens, because I feel like at this point it's inevitable, right? How can you say it's not? If you have eyes, you can see it. The West is collapsing. And it's okay to say that, I honestly think. So if there's anything that you guys could touch upon that would lead me to read the comments, maybe get a different perspective, maybe you want to push back on it and say, Matt, you're ridiculous. The West is not collapsing. The West is doing better than it's ever been. Sure, maybe I'll take it into consideration, but I still think my opinions are quite valid, and I'd love to read your comments about it down below as well in the comment section. Okay, guys? Hope you learned something from today's video. Hope you enjoyed the thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.